Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second virtual presentation for the fall. I'm Elizabeth Phillips, the Library Director of WCCC, and today we're here together with our other librarian, John Levitt, and with me today is Gail Roy, the Library Director of NMCC. We just want to say hi, yeah, and we are jointly sponsoring these events. And with us today, we are honored to have our very own local author, Kaileigh Deacon. Kaileigh is a freelance writer who spends most of her time when she isn't working, reading and of course writing. She writes for a local newspaper, and some of you may have seen her name in the Calais Advertiser. She's a graduate of Calais High School, and she has written 6 books, which she has self-published on Amazon. Kaileigh says that her short story collections are all connected and part of a series that centers around a woman who owns an antique store in coastal Maine. But I'll leave her to tell you more about her books and her love for writing. With November being National Novel Writing Month, it seems like the perfect time for this author talk with Kaileigh. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Kaileigh Deacon.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, everybody. I'm very honored to be here, and I apologize in advance for the sound of my voice. I'm suffering from a bit of laryngitis, but we're going to get through. I am, as Liz said, a writer for not only a newspaper, but for myself. I have been writing for as long as I could hold a pen. There are many pictures of me as a kid laying on my stomach and scribbling. Both of my parents were hugely instrumental in encouraging not only me to pursue my passion of writing, but to encourage me to start writing as well. My mom is a elementary school teacher here in the local area. She teaches in Princeton. She grew up writing children's books for herself that she would read to my brother and I and make up songs on long car rides. My dad was the epitome of nerddom and hosted weekly Dungeons and Dragons meetings at our house that he wrote himself. So the creativity was very strong in my family. When I first started to think about going to college, I didn't actually pursue writing as a degree. My mind told me that writing wasn't a legitimate profession, that it wasn't something I could make money at, and to get my head out of the clouds, put my feet on the ground, and get a real job. So I studied actually forensic anthropology. And during my time at the University of Maine, I continued to follow my passion for writing and took an abundance of English courses on the side, one of which was a creative writing course my sophomore year. In this class, the first day our teacher told us, we're going to have a novel written by the end of the semester. This is your project. This is what you're graded on. So inevitably, our class size dropped over half the first day because nobody wanted to write a novel in a semester. I admit I was skeptical about the possibility of doing it, but she introduced us to NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, where novelists get together and they write a novel in 30 days for the month of November. So she actually gave us a little extra time because it was the semester and we were taking on an abundance of other things. So we had half the semester to write a novel. And by the end of the semester, I realized that it really was my passion and it was something I wanted to stick with regardless. My professor read my novel, which, God bless her, was all handwritten in my teeny tiny handwriting and photocopied I stood in line at the photocopier for 20 minutes to photocopy my novel to pass in, and she continued to give me feedback even after the semester had ended. And so in addition to my parents, she was one of the great influences in getting me to pursue my passion of writing. National Novel Writing Month has been a big part of being able to force myself into publication. I have participated steadily for almost a decade. It's a great way as a writer to get your ideas down on paper by giving yourself that deadline. You have a much better chance of completing a project. I find that certainly in my journalism work. The threat of a deadline is the most motivating factor for anyone, as I'm sure most college students can say with paper deadlines. My favorite book I have written is a lot like a parent saying, which is my favorite child. It's very hard to pick one, but I have to say the first published book I did, Once Upon a Time, holds a special place in my heart because it was that first book I was really ready to say, all right, I want somebody else to read this besides my trusted group of friends and family. And I put myself out there really for the first time creatively, as opposed to my work in journalism. It was very intimidating getting my feet wet into the arena of self-publishing. I did everything self-taught for the most part. It's a very complex area to get into. It's thrilling and nerve-wracking and basically anything you can imagine. The biggest part of getting into it was, just doing my research like you do with anything. But that getting that book for the first time, seeing it on Kindle, and then getting the hard copy in my hand was probably one of the most thrilling experiences I have ever had in almost 33 years of life. But the book I wrote for my creative writing class also holds a special place in my heart. It was the first novel I completed. It was the first one that had gotten feedback from somebody I didn't know and didn't necessarily trust, in the form of my professor. She was very honest, and because of her critique of that novel, I was able to go on and do a lot of the other work that I've done. But I'm going to stop for a second. Does anybody have any questions so far?
Did you always want to be a writer from a young age?
Yes. If you go back and you look at my scrapbooks that my mom kept, I wanted to be a little bit of everything. Cashier, ballerina, doctor, typical things that kids want to be. But I always wanted to be a storyteller in some way. I was constantly forcing my cousins and my brother and all my friends to live action play the stories that I was creating in my head. They probably resent that now and wouldn't like me telling that, but they were fairly obliging. I have always loved writing. I find it very cathartic and very relaxing. I think part of that comes from the fact that I love reading as much as I do. I've always been encouraged to read and to pursue whatever makes me happy. And I haven't yet figured out how to get paid to read. So writing seemed like a logical step. My parents, when I was younger, told me that I could read to go to sleep. that the joke was on them. I stayed up all night reading. So my love for writing started early. I would always make up stories. The writing portion of school was never a challenge for me. I always enjoyed doing it. My friends would often ask me to write their stories for them, which obviously is not a good idea. And I still have some of them that are still in college today saying, I need help. But I don't mind because it is something I'm so passionate about. And I have all my stories from when I was younger, or most of them. Technology was not around, so hard copy it is with my childish, big handwriting that is almost impossible to read now.
But those are the best kinds of stories.
Yes.
And, were you influenced by any writers from, I mean, at a young age?
Definitely. Beverly Cleary is a huge influence on me. I read all the Ramona books, the Henry books, but Dear Mr. Henshaw is a Beverly Cleary book. It's about a young boy who wants to be a writer, and he constantly is writing letters to his favorite author and asking advice. And it's definitely one of my all-time favorite books. It's one that influenced me to follow writing. Amelia Atwater Rhodes is another writer, purely because of her age when she was first published. She was 13 when she published her first book, and I was completely floored by that because I was reading it as a 13-year-old. And I said, you know, it's possible. People can do this. And it just made me want to write even more. And then as I got older, other authors have influenced me. I'm not a huge Stephen King fan, which is probably like a blasphemous statement to say when you live in Maine. But I did absolutely love his book on writing. And I found so much inspiration as a writer, not only from the first half of the book where he talks about his own life and his struggle to become an author, but also in the second half of the book where he offers advice to writers. And it was the fastest I have ever devoured a Stephen King book in my life. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it has played a very big part in getting me to where I am today. I could go on and on about other authors because I'm just such a book nerd, but every author brings something to the table. Every author I read, whether positively or negatively, helps build me as a writer. I see things that other authors are doing and say, you know, this works, this doesn't work in my opinion. How can I take this premise? How can I take this genre and work myself into it or find that niche that I've been looking for? Stephen King has said good authors read, and they read all the time. And it is, in my personal experience, an absolutely factual statement. Without reading, I would struggle. If I have writer's block, which happens from time to time, I put my writing to the side and pick up a book, whether a new book by a new author or an old favorite that I've already read 15 times, and start to read. And reading gets the creative juices going for me. And it's one of the big ways that I'm inspired to write is by reading other authors' work. And technology being what it is very amazing because it allows me to connect with other authors that I might not have in the past. it creates a forum for writers and readers to connect, which is amazing. It's just phenomenal. I love it. But for inspiration, it comes from everywhere for me. I'm influenced by everything. Everybody I meet is a potential character in another story. My coworkers often ask me when I'm going to include them in a story. And I say, well, if I did, you wouldn't know about it. And my teachers in high school would often ask me, am I going to find you in am I going to find myself in one of your stories someday? That mean teacher that didn't, give you that A or B or whatever you wanted. And I joke with them a lot of times. I say, yeah, you're going to be, a murder victim in a murder mystery. But no, I do take from the people I meet, I take their characteristics, I take their behavior, the way they talk, and I find ways to incorporate them into stories that I'm writing. Obviously, in Down East Maine, the Maina accent plays a big part in my writing. It's a struggle to try to translate the Mainer accent into the written word. There is a lot of discussion on writing forums about the proper spelling of aya. And not everybody understands when you leave out R's where they should be and include H's. But Mainers understand. But I think that's what helps bring the words and the characters off the page is by injecting some of the real people I meet on a daily basis. It gives them more life and helps them come off the page better. I don't ever actually just take a whole person start to finish and incorporate them in my stories unless, like in my books that are published, it's a historical book. I do include some historical figures. Most of them are made up, but there are inevitably, when you're writing about history, big names that you can't avoid not writing about in certain times. But characters are what helps motivate the story, and by including people I meet, it just brings them to life and makes the story flow so much better. I love it. As for story inspiration, it's everywhere for me. It's in books. It's ironically at work sometimes. You wouldn't think of working at Walmart that you would find a whole lot of inspiration for books unless you're writing a comedy, but there is some inspiration there. My first book that was published once upon a time actually I got inspired to write that by visiting an antique store in Ellsworth called the Chicken Barn. I was walking around the antique store and looking at all of this stuff. It's old, it's beaten up, it's very interesting to me to look at it. And I got thinking, at one point this belonged to somebody. It meant something to somebody. It was part of somebody's life, even in a small way. And so taking that idea, I created my character, Reagan, in her antique shop in Down East Maine. And she finds that, the objects in her store do have history. They do have importance to somebody. And she gets, in some small way, to be part of those stories by going back to the past and seeing when that object, even in an insignificant way, was crucial to somebody else's life. And I think I like that because it's not only the history, it's the character, the objects become a character in themselves, and they become part of the story, and they get their own life in a way. And So I'm constantly going to antique shops to look for inspiration for new short stories, much to the irritation of my bank account. But I find inspiration everywhere and from everyone I meet. Everybody I meet has in some way inspired me to continue this crazy journey into writing. But yeah, I write what I read, so I write everything. Don't stick to one genre. The book I wrote for my sophomore class was a murder mystery, which has some connection to a real life crime, but not really. And I just finished writing a kid's story, which I'm working with a local artist on getting some illustrations for. It, I've written sci-fi, teen drama, or post-apocalyptic, Hunger Games-esque type thing. But I tend to write what I read, which is a little bit of everything, thanks to working in a bookstore at one point in my life. But the whole process of self-publishing is challenging in many ways. There are endless platforms to publish on, whether you want to publish hard copy, whether you want to publish Kindle, ebook, any of these platforms, there are so many different ways to do it. It can get overwhelming, and it did for me for a long time. And so it took a little longer for me to actually make the jump into self-publishing because of that. When I first started looking into self-publishing, it was strictly a print publication that I was looking for. And in that comes the cost of the cost of printing up front. And, I was out of college, student loans, I couldn't afford that. And I started to get very disheartened and started to think that there really was no way that this was going to be something I could do realistically. So I was avid against e-readers and ebooks and all of that for a very long time. I'm a book sniffer. I prefer to hold the book in my hand and sniff it. So I struggled with the idea of ebooks, but I bought myself an ebook or two and I started to get into it. And I realized the massive outreach you can get with an ebook and by publishing on these online platforms. And it helped propel me into, dangling my toes in the water and getting the first ebook out. It was challenging. It was full of missteps and mistakes. I had completely blank pages. I had formatting issues. The stories didn't work right. It was a mess at first, but it was a learning experience. It was something that I have grown from and can share with others that are interested in the same process. It's I chose to go with Amazon only because I have been an Amazon member forever. So I said, well, I'm already buying from them, so let's see if I can earn some money to spend there, inevitably on books. So I went onto their platform and it is so user-friendly. It takes you through everything. It gives you so many options, sometimes too many. I'm horrible at making a decision. So working through that first process helped me get better at it. And so the second book was a little easier, and the third book was a little easier after that. And eventually, by book 6, I'm fairly comfortable with it. It's a process I look forward to now. I can't wait until I log into Amazon and see that my book has gone live. And then I sit there and stare and wait for somebody to buy the first copy. And the first time I got a notification that my books had sold internationally was astounding and kind of shocking. I didn't understand what the appeal would be for somebody in India to read my book, but I have sold books over in India, and it's very rewarding. It helps to know that there is a reason to keep going and to keep following this dream or nightmare, depending on the day.
So do you get any fan mail?
Not necessarily. I do have some coworkers of mine at Walmart that do enjoy my books and are constantly coming up to me and asking when the next one's coming out. So I do get a lot of in-person compliments and questions about the next book. That is one of the best parts about living in our community, is the fact that, you know, everybody is very supportive, and people I don't necessarily know but recognize me, come up to me and say, "You're the writer." And it's very rewarding to hear somebody say that to me, because for so long I didn't think of myself that way. And as I started to let myself think, yeah, you know, I am a writer, I am. To hear somebody that I don't know come back and say, "Hey, you're the writer," is it's just very thrilling. It's very, very exciting.
We have a question on the chat. Yeah,
yes.
from John.
So the question is, do I plan, especially with mysteries, do I outline, do I let the story unfold? In NaNoWriMo terms, this is called planner or pantser, as in flying by the seat of your pants. Typically, I tend to be more of a pantser and kind of fly by the seat of my pants. I don't know where stories are going a lot of the time. There are some that by the time I get to the end of them, I'm like, well, that was unexpected. I had no idea that we were going to go that way. There are other stories that I do outline. Ironically, the murder mystery, I don't outline when I write a murder mystery. I enjoy seeing it unfold. I think the old adage of surprise in the writer, surprise in the reader is kind of plays a factor into that. But I have planned some. I have a little notebook I take with me everywhere that has a pen and has notes written in it. So it depends. I more or less jot notes than actually sit down and outline a story. Gail asks if I have a favorite writing spot or writing rituals. I don't necessarily have a favorite writing spot. My bed tends to be the most comfortable. I typically write by hand all of my first drafts, which can be very taxing later on, because then, you know, I've written the entire thing by hand and I have to go back and type it all. But I find that when I'm surrounded by nature, whether I'm looking out a window at it or actually sitting outside and writing, I'm able to let myself write more, and it flows better because I'm not as distracted by technology. The problem I have with getting onto my computer and writing on my computer is the fact that it's too easy to pull up that window and get onto Facebook or check my email or go to Amazon and see what I need to buy or don't need to buy. But I do enjoy getting away from that ever-present technology factor and just letting myself escape it. A friend of mine has a camp out in the middle of nowhere that has no cell phone service, no, internet. There is electricity and indoor plumbing because, let's face it, it's very hard to survive without those, in my opinion. But I find that when I go up there, I'm inspired more, and my pen moves a lot faster when I'm in that setting. As far as writing rituals, not necessarily. I don't. I tend to write more at night than I do, say, in the morning. I'm more of a nighttime writer, which is hard when I have to get up and go to work the next day. But I usually have a cup of tea handy when I'm writing. It seems to just make everything better. And I think as a writer, you have to drink a hot beverage when you write, whether it's coffee, tea, hot cocoa. I think it's just part of the writer package, as it were. So I that would be my biggest writing ritual, that and using a pen to write my first drafts a lot of the time. The exception is NaNoWriMo. I do not write my first drafts of NaNoWriMo by hand because you are required to submit an account by the end of it, and I can't type that fast. I mean, I'm a fast typer, but I cannot type 50,000 words at the last minute, having written by hand the entire time. But yeah, it's a challenging, exciting experience that I thoroughly enjoy and causes me to pull my hair out sometimes. It's a very isolated experience a lot of the times, and I find as a writer it's hard to explain to people who aren't writers why, I don't want to go out tonight. I've got a deadline, or I've got this idea and I just have to get it down. It's very hard to explain that to some people that don't write or find that passion in writing or reading. And other times everybody is, they're just like, you're a homebody, you don't want to go anywhere. It's like, no, I actually want to go, but if I don't get this down, I'm going to forget it, because inevitably I tell myself, yeah, I don't need to write that down. I remember it. No, I forgot. 5 minutes later and I forgot, which is why I keep a pen and paper next to my bed.
And do you focus on one book at a time, or do you write like back and forth?
I really should focus on one book at a time. I don't. I tend to be a little better when I'm working on a NaNoWriMo project, because there is that deadline of getting it done in a month. Otherwise, I have anywhere from 3 to 4 projects going at once, including my articles for the newspaper, or in addition to those articles. The books I work on are in various stages of the process. Some are in the planning stage, or I've got this idea right in the back of my head. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. I'm not ready to get it down yet. And then I've got some that are in the writing stage or the editing stage, or, there are many different books in different stages. And I actually have like 2 in editing and 1 or 2 in writing right now. And so I should write one at a time, but I don't. And it gets confusing, and I end up using the same character names in 3 different books, and I have to go back and then change a character's name completely, because it's not good if all of your characters in books that are completely different are named Nick. You know, that's not a great idea. Question: what are some good places to find a community of supportive writers online? NaNoWriMo is active, not just in November, but it is active year-round. And the people that run the website continue to keep the forums going even in the off months. And it's a great way. It's a nationwide, worldwide community, and you can connect with people from all over in the NaNoWriMo forums. There are a ton of Facebook groups available to writers. There are, well, in a non-corona world, there are a ton of in-person meetings as well. Discord, which is started as a platform for gamers to communicate while they were video gaming, actually has become much more than just a gaming platform. It's an excellent chat forum. There is a NanoMain forum on Discord, and there are writers from all over the state of Maine that are on there every day, sharing their stories, sharing ideas, pictures of their family, their friends, what inspires them, and also their writing companions, their cats, their dogs, their birds. You know, I'd like to say I have a really cool animal that hangs out with me, but it's just my 20-year-old cat that is hiding somewhere. But I think that's inevitable. Is, you know, there are a ton of online platforms now, and there are websites like Tableau and Redsy and all these places that allow writers to connect and share and support each other and critique each other. And it's very exciting to see how many people still enjoy stories and the written word in an age where it's too easy to just flip the TV on and get your fix that way. But there are contests on these platforms that get those creative juices going too. The art question about the art for the covers. So the first 5 books that I have published, they are stock photos from Amazon. They actually have a cover creator that they use on their platform, with a bunch of different stock photos that you can use to get try to find the right fit for your book. It's not always an exact fit. And I have had problems in the past with finding a cover that matched the story. But my 6th book, I couldn't find something that I liked. I couldn't find something that made sense for what I was doing. So I actually took the photograph myself. I had all these old postcards laying around, and the premise of the 6th book is it takes place in 6 different countries, over 6 different periods of time. And so I wanted as many different places represented in that cover as I could. And these postcards come from all over the world. So it kind of fit with the theme of the story. And it's something I'm probably going to look at going forward with my books, is trying to get more creative with that. I am not an artist by any stretch of the imagination. Stick figures are my go-to, and anything I can draw with a ruler. Sometimes I can't even get that right. But they do have an assortment of pictures and stuff on Amazon that I can use. For my kids book that I'm doing, I actually am working with local artist Nell Walton on getting some, not just illustrations for inside the book, but a cover for the book as well. It's very exciting. I can't wait to see what she has to show me. We're supposed to meet up this afternoon, and it's, I gave her the story, she read the story, and she came up with these creations based on what I wrote. And that is really cool. It's very interesting to see how what started in my head, usually a while ago, has come to life, not only on the page in words, but as well in pictures that are done by somebody else. And she really captured what I've seen so far is awesome. She really captured what was in my head. It's kind of creepy. How do I promote my books? Badly. I promote my books badly. I am the world's worst self-promoter. I have a Facebook page, Kaileigh Deacon Writer, which, God bless my friends, are all supporting me on. Amazon does do some promotional stuff where you can do, like, I do specials on my books. Whenever I release a new book, I do a special on previous books or the first book. And it's a lot of word of mouth for me. I am horrible. My friend is saying I need to be on Twitter and Instagram and all these other platforms, which is probably true. Most authors are, but I'm just really bad at it. And I think it's because I keep myself too busy and I don't make enough time for it. But I do a lot of word of mouth. I'm starting to do giveaways and to donate my books to different places, just to get my book in more places than it has been. The library has copies down in Calais. But yeah. Have I done book signings and talks in public libraries? No, I have not. I would love to. I think it would be interesting. I've been to a few book signings. I worked at Borders and Books A Million for a while and got to be part of book signings by Tess Gerritsen and Janet Chapman, fellow Maine writers, but I haven't actually done them myself. I would like to. I think it would be fun. I'm not sure anybody would come unless I told them I was going to bake cookies. But it would be fun. I would love to interact with people in person. I have spoken to a high school JMG class about writing, and I probably crushed some dreams because they're thinking, you're going to be super famous and super rich and it's all roses and sunshine, and it's not. It's a lot of hard work, and you make $1.40 off every book that you sell. So I'm not going out and buying a new Lexus or a mansion on Bar Harbor or anything, but I love getting to talk to people about writing and sharing my passion for it. And I tend to ramble when I get going about writing sometimes, just because I love it so much. And especially when I connect with other people that find that same passion, it's like anything else that you're passionate about it. Once you connect with somebody that shares that passion, all bets are off. You speak your own language and people don't understand a word you're saying. But I would love to get into more libraries. Hopefully that's possible once everything straightens out and people can start to gather again. Have I ever approached a publisher or thought about getting an agent? I have written several query letters for agencies, and not only for publishing, but for a literary agent as well. It's hard to know who's a right fit and who isn't a right fit, because a lot of agents, like when you go on websites or look at the writer's market book, there's just this giant list of agents, and it's trying to find that one person that you can connect with and that connects not only to you but to your writing as well. And there are so many people sending queries and stuff into publishers and agents. You don't always hear back, and when you don't hear back either one way or the other, it's very disheartening. Yeah, did it get lost in the mail? Did it go in their spam folder? But it's something I'm still interested in. There are agents and publishing houses out there that I hope would be a right fit for me. I would love to see my book available in bookstores. I would love to be able to walk into a bookstore and say, see my book on the shelf. And it's a dream I have, and it's finding the right book to get it there, and finding the right book and the right agent and the right publishing house all at the same time. You've got to get all those stars lined up just right to make it happen. And that was another reason I went to self-publishing first. You can create a fan base by self-publishing and getting your name out there, getting your books out there, and publishers can go and literary agents can go and look at your books and stuff online and see how they're doing, what people have to say about them. And it all helps in the end. That's part of self-promotion in a way, is just getting your stuff out there as much as possible. I have short stories in the newspaper sometimes when we do a writer's corner. I submit to magazines, websites for contests all the time. It's just getting everything out there. And hopefully someday I will get a literary agent or a publishing deal and I can jump through my roof, which hopefully then I will have enough money to fix for jumping through the roof. But writing is just, it's what I do. And as it's taken me a while to commit to it, but every day, every month, every year that passes now is just more steps towards getting that dream and continuing my writing. Even if my family and friends are the only people that ever read them, it's still something I'm going to do it regardless. And I think that is key in moving forward. How many hours a day do I spend writing? Not as many as I should. Depends on the day. Honestly, I try to write for at least an hour a day. It's trying to get into that routine and forcing myself to write. It's very hard sometimes to sit down and stare at a computer or a page and just see it sit blank because you're just not in the right mindset to write. And it's getting past that and, saying, even if I write something that I completely scrap tomorrow, it's still getting something written. It's getting into that habit. It's creating the ritual. And so I try to do at least an hour a day. Deadline days for the newspaper are usually longer because I am the world's best procrastinator. and put everything off until the last possible minute when it comes to articles. And having a deadline helps, but I tend to write more on deadline days than I do on other days. And usually at night, sometimes in the morning before I go to work while I'm having my tea and my breakfast, I'll write, but more often than not, it's in the evenings and sometimes too late into the evenings, especially when you have to get up and go to work early. But when I wake up in the morning, I know it's worth it because that's usually when I do my best writing is at night. And I don't have to scrap as much of it as other times. But there is no right answer when it comes to publication. It's you got to go with your gut. You got to go with what feels best for you as a writer. Amazon was the right option for me when I started. I would probably stick with it now, just because of how user-friendly it is and the fact that they have software designed specifically for publishing ebooks and self-published paperbacks like I have, and it just makes it a lot easier on the writer. My dream is to have an editor someday so I don't have to edit my own work. It's the hardest thing I have ever done and probably will ever do. It's knowing when to cut, because I know how the story is supposed to play out in my head. I know what the characters are doing. I know where this is going to go because I've already written the book, but trying to see it through the mind of somebody that doesn't is very difficult. And I'm horrible at grammar as well. I did not really get taught grammar when I was younger, and so I struggle with it as an adult. I have tried to teach myself the basics of grammar, and I've gotten better thanks to a lot of books, and thanks to, in a large part, to the number of gray hairs on my mother's head for tutoring me in grammar. But she is my go-to editor for grammar. Thankfully, I have her and can send her my stuff and say, please make sure this is right, because I'm not sure. But it's also making sure the story flows and makes sense, and it all makes sense in my head, but what's in my head doesn't always translate the way it should on the written page. So it helps to have editors and readers for that. And I have a pretty great group of people that are willing to do that for me and offer me honest feedback about what they think. So hopefully they will continue to do that. The best part of writing, I think, is seeing it come together and seeing it unfold for me. Like I said earlier, I'm more of a pantser. I have no idea where things are going when I start. And by the end of the story, I'm just as surprised as the reader is, or upset with myself as the reader is, depending on what I do in the story. I'm a reader first and foremost, and then I'm a writer, and I write as a reader, if that makes sense. I write the way I want to read. The things that make me passionate as a reader are what I try to write. Do I find that the characters start to dictate how the story evolves? Yes, absolutely. Those little guys have a mind of their own. I start them off, and then they kind of become their own people. And as they become their own people, the story changes. So some stories I may start with a a plan or an idea of where I want the story to go, but as the characters develop, I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. This person isn't gonna let me do that. And they really start to take on a life of their own and change the story. When I wrote my first murder mystery, initially I had somebody else in mind for the killer. And then by the end of the book, it was this other person. And I was like, oh, okay. Because the first person I had wanted to make the killer was too nice. I liked him too much. I didn't want him to be the killer anymore. So by then, the story had changed. It had become something different because I had created a character I enjoyed too much and didn't want to ruin him. So some authors, that doesn't stop though. You get to like the characters and then they kill them or they turn them into bad guys. But I try to write as a reader and let, as a reader, where would I want this to go? Where would I want this to go into the future? What characters mean the most to me? What characters stand out? And a lot of the time that kind of changes my story. I've had stories where I started off with a character I thought was going to play a real pivotal role, and then I was like, no, they're just not that good. I don't like them. And so they become a much smaller character than I had anticipated them being. Do I have characters that recur from book to book? Yes. In my 6 books that are published, the main character is the same regardless of the book. They are collections of short stories. Each book has 5 short stories, with the exception of the last one, which has 6. And my main character is the same in all of them. She does have a group of supporting characters in her circle that pretty much stay the same book to book. Sometimes I'll introduce one like in story 3 of the first book, and they don't come back till story 4 of the 3rd book. For these books, I write them a lot like in my head, they write a lot like a television show. Each short story in my head plays out like an episode of a television show. And so I try to keep recurring characters in the present. The past doesn't usually have a recurring character because she goes to so many different places. But she has a couple friends in the present that carry throughout, and her significant other carries throughout the stories. But everybody else pretty much changes, which I like that dynamic. I get to keep characters I've already come to know and care about and have grown. And then I get to create whole new characters every time and see how they're going to play out in the story and how they're going to interact with the characters I've already created. And it's very interesting to see the way that well-developed characters and newer characters interact with each other. You get a whole different dynamic. You've got an established dynamic with your recurring characters from book to book, and then you have this whole new personality and dynamic that comes through when you create characters for the first time, and they get to interact with those well-developed characters, and it can change not only the new characters into maybe more of a significant role later on, or leave a lasting impact on our recurring characters, but they can change the way that the recurring characters interact with themselves and each other, and they can change for better or worse those recurring characters, and it creates conflict sometimes, and conflict is essential in one form or another to a good story and to continuing a story, and creating that conflict with characters by adding new characters into it is one way to do it. And people interact with people differently, and everybody you meet changes something about you, even if it's just for 5 seconds in a day. Just that one interaction can change how you see the rest of the day. And it's the same with bringing new characters into a recurring character.
Thank you, Kaileigh, so much for sharing with us your passion on writing. We thoroughly enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you.